Well, welcome to the Suicide Monk, and I am your host, and my name is Britton. Just a little disclaimer to let you all know that we are not, I do speak to psychologists and doctors, but we're here to give life experience and not advice. We're not here to lead you down one path or the other, but hopefully you can take some of this information that we have applied to our own lives and apply it to yours. The things that have helped us will hopefully help you. So just wanted to let you know that a lot of us are coaches. I am opening spots for coaching, so that's available. And if you want to support any of these authors, the foundations that I talked to, some of the not-for-profits, I'll put all the links down below. And then if you want to support the Suicide Monk, I will put a GoFundMe down below as well. So those things are just what I wanted to talk about. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the good side. Enjoy the conversation. Well, welcome to the Suicide Monk, and my name is Britton, and this is, today we have Debi Roberts, and she is got the OLLIE Foundation, OLLIE, right?
That's correct.
And you're from, you're from the UK?
Yeah, so the OLLIE Foundation is a UK-based suicide prevention charity, but because so much of our work is online, we have delegates come from all over the world to join in the various sessions that we offer, and we offer an awful lot of training and well-being events, and they're all free access. So we have a lot of American delegates join us, which is great.
That's amazing. How did you start that? What got you?
So long story.
Yeah. Well, that's what this is for.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So my work really has always been around what supports people to flourish. And I was really focused particularly on young people. My master's is emotional intelligence in educational settings. So I was really all about how we flourish and make the most of life. And of course, the opposite of that, I mean, as far opposite as you can be, is thinking that life isn't worth living and ending your life. So when my career was getting very busy, I just published a book. I was writing mental health courses and CBT courses and also courses.
What's CBT? I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay.
So I had, the great pleasure of supporting others to support the young people that they had a duty of care for. And around that time, the OLLIE Foundation came to be. So the OLLIE Foundation was set up by three parents, Chris, Jane, and Stuart. And tragically, they had each lost a son to suicide. And they met in absolutely devastating, all three teenage boys. They didn't know each other, but they met in a bereavement support group. And when they met, there was an energy, and they wanted to do something to stop anyone else going through what they were going through. So they set up the foundation. Initially, they wanted to, what they looked at was, where are our kids most of the time? And if you're in, if you're in the West, most kids most of the time are in school, right? So they wanted to work out, well, what do schools know about suicide intervention and prevention? And to their absolute dismay, what they found out was in England, it's very little. It's not part of the essential basic training that a teacher would have. And it might be the case here too. So they started by bringing others in to provide training. And at that time, they heard about my work, and they asked me to join as a board member to help them make sure that they were doing things as needed. What are you going to say? No? So, of course, I joined. It was my absolute honor to do so. But I made clear, listen, I'm super busy doing all this stuff, so I can't be a really active board member, and that was all fine. But when I joined, I was able to, very delicately drop another bomb in that boardroom, which is, what you have just discovered around teachers. That is also true for first responders, for doctors, for nurses. It is not part of their essential basic training. Sure, they might have a half an hour session or an hour talk
Right.
about it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's not going to touch the sides of what they need, right?
Right. Right.
So this was quite shocking to them, and I I love fairy stories. I use fairy stories to teach all the time, and I don't know if you would be familiar with the story of the Emperor's New Clothes. Is that a story you know over here? It's one of the sort of
Um,
big famous German European fairy stories, but
okay.
essentially, let me tell you very quickly. Essentially, it's of a very foolish king who was also very he wanted people to like him, and so he got played. He got played by two scammers who told him only very clever people can see the magic thread, and he paid them thousands and thousands to create this magic cloak, but only the cleverest people could see. And of course, when he paraded through the town, everyone was too scared to say the emperor's not wearing any clothes, but that was the reality. The emperor was not wearing any clothes. But there was one little boy who didn't know, and started shouting, "The emperor's got new clothes on!" And of course, then everyone was like, "Oh, the emperor's got new clothes on." Anyway, I've taken up a lot of time explaining
No,
this
no, no,
very.
no, you're fine. You keep going.
But that story, I feel, is slightly representative of our mental health crisis in both our countries. In that, first responders, nurses, doctors, counsellors, psychiatrists, they know they don't have the training, but the
Oh, yeah.
public don't.
Hmm.
So, a doctor isn't surprised when to hear this, but the public might be absolutely mortified to know that if they've been told in a crisis to go to the ED, that they're going to be met by someone who isn't necessarily trained. Well, this is true in the UK at least. I don't know if it's true over here. So it'll be interesting to find out more about
Well,
that one.
as far as like suicide prevention,
And intervention, really effective
with
intervention.
yeah, there, I would say it's probably similar.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
suicide's a very taboo subject, so
Exactly.
even to approach it from like this side of trying to help somebody, it's a very difficult thing to even approach and deal with mentally. It's like, why would from a healthy side of it, it's like, why would you ever want to take your life?
Of
People
course.
don't understand it. So it's,
Yeah.
how do you train somebody that doesn't think like that
Yeah.
to intervene in something like, because they're trying to save a life where the person in front of you is trying to take their life.
Absolutely. And actually, I developed a talk, a training that I deliver to healthcare professionals and absolutely anyone who wants to hear it. It's called The History of Suicide.
Okay.
And we forget that actually suicide has existed as long as man has existed. So in this talk, and if you want, I can share a few bits of
Yeah,
information from it.
absolutely. Please do.
So, the Romans and the Greeks, they weren't as uptight about it as we are.
Right.
In fact,
But
they had some rules though. So if you were part of the army or if you were a slave, it was forbidden to kill yourself. In fact, if you had bought a slave and they had the audacity to kill themselves within 6 months of purchase, you could claim a full refund. So
wow.
you're beginning to see that
Hmm.
they had a very different sense of suicide.
Yep.
And it was, in terms of punishment, it was really. It was around letting people down. You were a resource if you were a slave or if you were part of the army.
Hmm.
Now we move into Europe in the Middle Ages,
Yeah.
where Catholicism and Christianity had really taken hold, and the church at that point was moving away from martyrdom. For the beginning of our the Christian church, martyrdom was something, but
What is martyrdom?
so to kill yourself, to martyr
Okay, to be a martyr.
yeah,
Okay.
for a good cause,
Okay.
that was not seen to be so terrible, but by the Middle Ages, it definitely was. And certainly in Europe, the laws meant that if you took your life, first of all, it was made illegal. If you took your life, if we couldn't punish you, we would punish your
Right.
family. So
Hmm.
that meant all your possessions, your actual property would be confiscated. It would go to
Hmm.
the monarchy, and your family would be left destitute. Now, across time, we have always had this figure that 3 out of 4 suicides are male, but 3 out of 4 attempts are female.
Right.
That's pretty much a theme across most countries and across most of time.
Yeah.
So if we think about this time back in, say, the 15th, 16th century, where a suicide was punishable by death, if 3 out of 4 suicides were male, then what we were doing was we were creating generational poverty by removing the home of the children and the woman who.
What do you mean if suicide was punishable by death?
So sorry. If suicide was punishable, if your death, I'm so sorry, thank you for picking that up. If it was punishable in that way, in that all your belongings would be removed,
Yeah.
but actually it was punishable by death. So if you
Well, that's
tried,
what I was wondering for
yeah,
your family members.
not for your family members, but
No.
if you tried to end your life, there were different punishments for sure.
Oh, and
But
you
if
didn't succeed.
Yeah, yeah. But if
Ah,
you did, then your family would have all their belongings removed.
right.
And if I go back to my equation, if 3 out of 4 suicides are male, then it meant that we were creating these huge numbers of children and women who needed to be looked after by the state. Now, this was creating a huge economic burden for the towns, the parish councils that had to look after and feed people. So now, if you think about another thing that you should know is up until that point in history, a coroner could always it had 2 verdicts around suicide: fellow de se, which is self-murder, or non compos mentis, which means madness. So
Oh,
there is a point in time around the 16th, 17th century in the UK where people had just had enough. The people who were in charge of local towns had had enough of paying for because this punishment wasn't working. It wasn't stopping people taking their lives. But they found a little tweak to the law, and that was changing the verdict of the coroner. So the law said that if you were mad at the time of your death, then your estate could not be absorbed by the monarchy. So guess what happened? Up until that point, nearly 95% of all coroners' reports were fellow de se, self-murder, and murder is punishable. Literally overnight, by changing and giving verdicts of non compos mentis or madness, nearly every coroner's report said non compos mentis, and that meant these families were not having their homes removed. Now, solved a problem then. But here's what it did for you and me and everyone that's come since. So let me just rewind a moment. If your property could be taken away from you, you can imagine how much fear, how much shame. You didn't want anyone talking about your relative.
right.
People weren't going to talk about that. So you can see the epigenetic emotional baggage, the shadow that has been cast across time. Because this sense of shame and fear has, as far as I'm concerned, is very much tied up with these punitive responses to families who had the misfortune to have a member of their family who took their life. So it's really interesting to me that it wasn't the doctors that changed the law, it was the lawmen, because the towns couldn't afford to keep serving all these destitute people, and
Right.
we were creating generational poverty.
Yeah.
So it was good to change the law, but what we've done is we've created a belief that most people don't even realize that suicide is there's a medicalized view of suicide, which goes back to your
Huge.
earlier point around people being scared. When the reality is, and I'm pretty confident it's the same here as it is in the UK, around half of all suicides would not meet the criteria for mental illness.
I would agree with that. That's
Most,
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
most people assume, you spoke earlier about if you've not had any connection to suicide, we treat life as a gift. So to give your life away seems madness, doesn't it?
Right.
It just seems absolutely crazy. And So when we make assumptions based on that, and we do make assumptions to make sense of the world, if they must be mad, and if they're mad, I can't help here. We need someone trained, someone with a ology at the end of their name, because this person is mad, and I could make the situation worse, or perhaps I'm in danger. And this is true of our student nurses and our nurses as well. And actually, I have found many healthcare professionals are not prepared to have that conversation because the assumption is it needs somebody with more qualification.
Right.
And my little charity is here to teach the world that you can. We have a picture of someone holding an umbrella and two people under it, and it says, "I'll stand in the rain with you." And for me, that's suicide intervention. Sometimes it's just a chatty person at the bus stop or in the queue, in the line, and they talk to you and they smile and they ask you how your day was. And unbelievably, that could be all that makes the difference to them that day. I am a great believer in suicide intervention, and I think we can all do it. And I've worked even with children. I remember these two boys. They were 11 years old, and they were crossing. They were crossing over a bridge that went over a big freeway. And as they were crossing, they got closer and closer to a guy. And as they got closer, they realized he wasn't standing still on the bridge. He was on the other side of the railing. And there were three of them, actually. And I remember interviewing them because they immediately, there was just no concern about anything really. They just spontaneously, one ran to get help from adults and the other two ran and just held on to the man with no thought to their own well-being, no concern. And when I interviewed them, because they were over the news, they were even flown out to America, actually. They were on news shows here. They were hailed as heroes, and people were saying, what gave you the confidence to do that when most adults wouldn't have done that? And I remember speaking to these young boys, and they were bemused. They didn't understand why people were making a fuss about them. Like, well, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? And one of the boys said to me, well, you know what? My fear of seeing that man jump and die was greater than my fear of helping him. And it was as simple as that. The only
Got me
thing...
there.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah. So we are the first people in the world to use a mixture of goal setting and conflict resolution to create a sort of structured conversation that can really support in those moments of crisis. And we believe anyone can do this. And we give these talks all the time, as I say, quite freely. Anyone can join them. So I'm really happy to talk you through that if you would like.
I would, because I need you to repeat that. I'm still coming
Still
off
back
the
on the
spin there.
bridge.
Yeah, just like it got me. That one got me good. Yeah, it's especially when you start with kids. It's like,
Yeah. Well,
so.
I'll tell you another story that I'm going
No,
to
please,
apologize in advance
please.
because it may
No.
definitely get you. So I grew up with a guy. We were best friends. There were a group of us, and David. I love him like a brother. And when I started work, I met this gorgeous woman called Zoe, and I just went into matchmaker mode, and they fell in love. They got married, and they had children at the same time as I had children. They moved to Australia. And we lost touch for a number of years. But around 24 years later, we reconnected. And their oldest boy was now 25. And it was they flew over to England. We spent days just talking, catching up on life. And I'm going to get myself. A couple of weeks later, they rang me. It was the middle of the night. Elliot, their eldest, had taken his life. And as the CEO of a charity that works in suicide prevention, I wasn't even... The thing that was breaking my heart more than what they had just told me was that I knew that their story had just begun, that the pain they felt in that moment was only just beginning. Now, because they were in Australia and I was in England, there was something quite useful there, because in the middle of the night when they were lost and needed to talk to someone, they could ring me, and I'd be wide awake and able to sort of hold that space for them.
Yeah.
It was, as you can imagine, completely devastating, and that was 6 years ago, and I still feel sick to my stomach when I tell you about it. But here's why I'm telling you. 2 days later, I get a phone call from a family. Their 25-year-old daughter, same age as Elliot, didn't think she could continue living anymore. They rang and said, you can't make the situation worse. We've been to hospital. We've seen the crisis team. We've seen the mental health team. We've seen the GP. There is nothing that you could do to make the situation worse, because all these people have seen her today and nothing is changing. She still wants to end her life. So I said, look, if she wants to see me, absolutely. Let's meet. Now, I knew something for sure. If she said yes, she didn't want to die.
Right.
What she didn't know was how to continue living.
Right.
And I felt like that I can handle. So we met, and I was very direct with her. And this is the conflict resolution piece. I'll talk you through it. I said to her, I know that you want to die. I know that there's something that's brought you to that place today. So whatever it is, I get it's big, it's real for you. But you're here with me now. So there must be something, even just one tiny thing, that is stopping you. So to me, the conflict is to kill myself, not to kill myself. Would you agree that that's the conflict as you see it? And she said, yeah, that's the conflict. And she agreed. So I said, okay, great. So what I'm interested in now is the need behind both those wants. Why do you need to kill yourself? And what has stopped you up till now? Why do you need to stay alive?
Yeah.
And she explained to me that the need was to stop the voices in her head. Now, she wasn't psychotic and she wasn't hearing voices.
I know.
Okay, but what she was hearing continually was her inner critic. She had given residency to this amazing bully that liked to remind her 24/7 how useless she was, how everything she did was rubbish, just critique all day long, and she couldn't bear it anymore. And, our internal voice is our loudest voice. It's the one we hear most clearly. Okay, so now we're beginning to understand what's going on for her. I wanted to know, well, if it's that bad, why haven't you ended your life? And she said, well, the one thing that's stopping me is I don't want to hurt my parents. So I asked her, are your wants are in conflict? You can't die and stay alive at the same time. That's why it's a conflict. But are your needs in direct conflict? Do you think that there's any version of this universe where you could stop your parents from being hurt and you could stop the voices in your head? And she agreed they're not in direct conflict. So once I had that agreement that they weren't cancelling each other out, I asked her, well, what would it be like for you if you could have both of them? What would it be like if you stopped your parents from ever being hurt by your suicide and you could stop the voices in your head? And she just said, I'd feel content. So I said, okay, we've sort of written a sentence and I'm going to read it back to you and I'm going to add the word because, a bit like word association. And you're just going to tell me the first thing that comes into your mind. And we're going to keep going until you have nothing left to say. So to feel content, I have to stop the thoughts in my head. And to stop the thoughts in my head, I must kill myself because, and she was really like lightning. She said, because I don't know how else to stop these thoughts. Okay, thank you. To feel content, I have to stop the thoughts in my head, and to stop the thoughts in my head, I must kill myself because, and she said, I don't know how else to stop these thoughts because I've tried everything and nothing works. Because I don't know what else will work. Because I want to be normal. Because, and she didn't have anything left to say. What we did in that moment, and you've seen how quickly I've done this, it's a really quick thing to do. But what we've done is surfaced all the reasons that make sense to her today why killing herself is a viable option. It will resolve all those problems. It will stop the thoughts in her head. So now what we have to do is try and break the logic. And
Right.
if we can break the logic in just one of those sentences, then suicide is not the only option, which right now for her it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So again, with this person on this occasion, it wasn't too hard and it didn't take too long. So the first thing she said was, I don't know how to stop these thoughts. And I completely agreed with her. I said, my darling, I can absolutely see that. I can see like the stress in you. I can hear it in your voice. I can see how painful it is. And then I said, the thing is, even though that is true, I'm just wondering if anyone else can. So I'm honouring her position. I'm completely agreeing with her, but I'm just starting to get curious. Then the next thing she said was around nothing works. I've tried everything, nothing works. Again, completely agree. Of course, you've tried so many things and nothing's helped you. And then again, I just sort of got curious with the idea about, although that's true, although you've tried lots of things and nothing's helped, I'm just wondering if that means we haven't found the right thing yet. Because my hunch is that there is something out there that will help you. We just haven't found it yet. And we carried on in this way, just gently unpicking this sort of mess of string that had got knotted up into a ball and on that day felt too much for her. And by the end, we had unpicked everything. And then we moved into the goal setting. And that's another longer story, which I'm happy to share with you.
Absolutely. Please do.
Well, okay, so she didn't know that I was using two processes. So we're sort of done with the conflict resolution piece.
Right.
As I said, she doesn't know it's two conversations, but I do. So the next step is the goal setting. So you remember the one positive thing she had said in the conflict piece was she would feel content if she could have both her needs met.
Right.
I put that at the top of the piece of paper that we were using. And I said, okay, so if the goal is to feel content, what right now in this moment is stopping you? What are all the things that are stopping you feeling content? First of all, she said, the way I perceive myself. And then she started giving me some detail. She said, it's my acne and my skin, my weight, the way I look. I have no friends. I have a very low paid, rubbish job. My boss is horrible to me. And then at the bottom of the piece of paper, she wrote the things that we often hear people also include. I'm worthless. I feel like I'm a burden. People would be better off without me. So remember, I just got to underline something because I don't think I mentioned this really. The point of telling you about David and Zoe and Elliot is because if that hadn't happened 2 days ago, I'm not sure I would have had the balls to go and talk to this girl. But I absolutely was like, not on my watch. We are not losing another 25-year-old. This is not happening. And I now deliver this as a lecture. It's called the Elliot Strickland Lecture. It's in honor of Elliot. But I can hand on heart say I would not have done this because this was the first time I'd ever done this. I'd always had a hunch that this conflict resolution and goal setting together could support someone in crisis. But it's totally unethical to go and look for someone and say, are you feeling suicidal? Can I practice this on you? You couldn't do that. But it was the way the parents said to me, anything you could do because you literally couldn't make it worse. And with their permission and with Elliot just having left the planet and with this girl saying, I want to talk to you, it gave me the confidence to do this. But I got to be honest with all your listeners. Those were like the stars aligning. I'd never done this before. And I have since done it many times. And I have to say, every time it's been successful. I'm not suggesting that every time it would be, but it certainly has been for me. So let me tell you about the goal setting process. So she's listed all her obstacles. So We already got part of the story earlier when we were doing the conflict resolution bit,
Hmm.
and you'll probably noticed how quick it was. Like, people get
Yeah.
very honest with this process
Yes.
because it's non-confrontational. There's no blame, there's no judgment. It's just asking a few questions.
It's introspection.
Yeah, yeah, and it really is.
It's honestly what you're actually asking somebody like me to do is pick apart, why is suicide the black and white? Why
Yeah,
is your response system automatically go here?
yeah,
If you can figure that out, then that stops having power.
yeah,
So and it's not just one thing, it's many, many different branches. And that's okay. It's now that you've recognized why, again, I was going through this the other day. I got slapped in the face with this fight or flight that I haven't experienced in 6 months, and I've lived in it for 54 years at this point,
right,
and so it smacked me, and I'm like, but the approach was different. I'm
right,
like, okay, so I understand what life looks like now, but why is suicide my auto response system? Okay, there's trauma behind that, and there's a reason, and it's
yeah.
just a matter of sitting with that and figuring that out, so that doesn't have the power that it has always had. So I'm sorry, please go ahead with the goal system.
Yeah, I
That
will.
was well
But
said.
just to honour what you just said, I don't know if you would say this was true for you, but I know with a lot of trauma responses, our go-to thing. So in your case, it's like really extreme fight or flight.
Right.
But for a lot of people, it's, well, this thing worked for me as a protective behaviour way back
Right.
when,
Mhm.
and we just go back to it. It's automatic, but it isn't
Yes.
necessarily the thing that we need to do right now. So it's great that you're able to work through that.
Yeah. My auto response is rage. Okay. So
Okay.
that's how I was molested and hit a lot, beat a lot, and a lot of emotional, sexual, spiritual, all the, if there's an abuse, I've,
Yeah.
experienced a lot of that abandonment, all of it. So I understand why suicide got a hold of me.
Mhm.
Um, I don't believe the lies now
Right.
that I built my protection around.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's the big thing. So I'm rewriting my story now. And that's
Oh,
why I'm able to look at this and be like, why is I understand you're upset, Britain, but why is suicide the auto response for solution
yeah.
or problem solving? Because it's actually not a problem solver. It actually doesn't solve anything. It actually creates more problems. Out on the side of it, we don't necessarily understand that what we're doing
Mm.
to other people. We really, really don't. And even as aware of myself as I am and my surroundings and the people, I didn't see it until I got really, really close to it and realized how hard this is for people.
Yeah. Yes. It's
Like I
so,
had no idea.
so hard.
Yeah.
And actually, when we finish with the goal setting, I'd
Mm-hmm.
really love to come back to this around something that most people aren't aware of, that makes it extra hard. But we
Okay.
can come back to that, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So to finish this story off with this beautiful young woman, um, so the first obstacle she had was her perception of herself, and I was like, ah. I don't really want to start there because that's huge. But fortunately, the very next thing she'd written was her acne and her scars. Now, I will be really honest with everyone listening to this. I looked at this young woman, and yeah, her skin was not perfect,
Right.
but like, you want to kill yourself over, like, your skin looks great to me. It looks fine. Like, most people would be happy.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's not about what I think, it's about what she thought about herself. So it was saying that kind of thing was just going to be awful to her, that, it was totally disrespectful. So I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, but your skin looks great. And for anyone listening, if you are ever working with someone in suicidal crisis, do not disrespect them by saying, oh, but you've got this and you've got that and you've got so
Right.
much to live for. That is just,
Oh,
believe me, they
yeah,
know.
it's a kick in the gut, actually.
Yeah, it really is. It's
But
like,
it's hard to understand from their side
I
because all
know,
they want to do is save you.
I know, I know. But I tell you, I coach and train so many people. I have so many conversations with parents, and I'm saying, you want to scream and cry? Knock yourself out, but go and do it in your car where they
Mhm.
can't hear you. Do not sit on the end of their bed and say, "Look what you're doing to me," and like, believe me, they can't cope with their own lives, and now you're
Right.
putting that on them. And I get that that's completely different thinking for a lot of parents. Anyway, we digress. Let me finish with the goal setting. So the next thing was her acne and scars. I've already shared. I didn't think her skin looked that terrible, but it was irrelevant what I thought. All that mattered was what she thought. So we spoke for probably around 5 minutes, and we were just talking about, what she knew about acne and helping her skin. Turns out she knew loads. She knew about chemical peels and camouflage makeup. She actually knew quite a lot. So the next step in this process is to imagine that we have jumped into the future. This is going to sound a bit whimsical, but believe me, it's very powerful. So with this young woman, we agreed 3 months from now. So I said,
So you
what
get
would
her to you
you
talked her
imagine
off.
a
You get her to
future?
talk herself off the ledge enough to make an agreement with you.
No, no. So not quite that.
Okay.
But not dissimilar. What we're doing is, so she said one of her problems is her acne. We've
Mhm.
had a small conversation about what the problem is and what the solution might look like. And then we imagine, I want to jump into the future 3 months from now when your skin looks good. Um,
Okay.
can we write that down as, in 3 months' time, I know how to make my skin look good. And because we'd had this conversation about all the things she knew, she was absolutely willing to go there and write down, in 3 months, I know how to make my skin look good.
Hmm.
Now, I don't have a magic wand, and nor does she, and I imagine no one listening does either. I don't know, but I'm going to go there and say you probably don't. So to say you're going to have perfect skin in 3 months would be cruel. We're not saying that. We're using her words, and we're just getting an agreement that in 3 months she will know how to make her skin look good enough for her,
Hmm.
that she would be happy. So then we take the next thing on her list, and it was her weight. Now, she was not a particularly big girl, but she was a little bigger than she wanted to
Sure.
be.
Yeah.
So we had a reasonable conversation about her diet and what size she would want to be. She didn't want to be like a size 6. She wanted to be one dress size smaller. That
Right.
she felt would be comfortable for her. So again, we wrote in 3 months' time that she was a size that she felt good with. When I met her, all of these things in her obstacle list were like this big dark cloud on top of her, just raining down, storming down. But
Mhm.
in this process, what we've done is we have literally written it down and put it in boxes, and suddenly everything seems manageable. It's all in
Mhm.
a little compartment.
Yep.
We've imagined what it would be like in 3 months' time. And this is really, I know it might sound nonsense, but there's good neuroscience behind this. Because when you can imagine it, you're much better at looking for the opportunities to make it happen. It's like a heat-seeking missile for your subconscious. There's a
S- Can I ask you a question about this?
yeah.
So that's almost like a manifestation type, like thinking about it, putting something positive in place, and then working towards that is
So it's a lot deeper than that, because
okay.
there are 2 or 3 more steps to this process. So now we've got each of her obstacles. We've imagined what it would be like in 3 months' time, where each of these obstacles no longer exist. Then the next step So we don't just stop there, because that would be manifestation, right? That
Okay.
would just be, I'm sending a message out to the universe, and
Right.
and that's all cool, that's all good, but we want to do a bit more than that. We really want to help the universe now with a bit of, meet me halfway.
Yes.
So in the next section, we're going to list all the things that we're going to have to do to make that future reality become her current reality. And then the step after that is we check the logic of what we say we're going to do. Will that really achieve it? And then the next step is we put all these notes that we've made of tasks that we're going to do to achieve all of these future realities. We put them in a time-dependent plan. So it could be on a great big map on the wall or on the floor or on your mirror, and you literally have a go-to plan. So it's yes, we could stop at the manifestation bit, but I would just say to your listeners, there's really good neuroscience around this. There's a part of your brain, right? We're all familiar with the five senses. If you heard, saw, smelt, felt everything that you are exposed to, you wouldn't have time for anything else if all of that information got through to your brain. So there's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system, and it's a bit like a guard dog. So it lets certain information in, and it lets certain information out. So, Britton, if you tell yourself that you are just rubbish and everything you do is rubbish, guess what happens? You can be amazing and brilliant all day long and knock it out of the park all day long. And then you have 1 minute where you trip over and you spill coffee down yourself. And the reticular activating system gets very busy then. That's the information it needed. They knew you were an idiot. They knew you were going to screw up.
Right.
So not only does it let information in, but you can feed it information. So if you tell yourself you're an idiot, this system is listening to you, and it will look for information to back up your claim that you're an idiot. If we look at all her obstacles, she had bad skin, she was overweight, she was this, she was that, she was the other. That was the internal bully. That was the internal voice telling herself that nothing was good enough. Now we've imagined 3 months from now, she's got a new voice. She's got something new to work towards, and she is programming her brain actually to look for those opportunities that are going to bring her closer to those short-term goals that will ultimately allow her to get to that big goal, which is, I feel content. So another story for you if you have the time.
Absolutely.
So the OLLIE Foundation tragically gets phone calls now and again from loved ones, typically parents who are burying their adult child. And they didn't know about us. They don't really want to know about us. But they don't want any money to be wasted on flowers at the funeral. And they've searched out like a grassroots, really walking the talk foundation, and they come across us and they say, we want all money to come to you. Can we have your bank details? Anyway, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end of the call, they say, the tragedy on top of a tragedy is that we can see that they were trying to get better. We now know that they had started antidepressants. Okay, so I'd had this conversation time and time again. It's March 2020. It's summer 2020. I can see myself now walking around my garden under a particular tree, and I get a call from Sam's mum. Sam had taken his life last week, and it was verbatim the same conversation I'd had with any number of parents. The funeral is in 2 weeks' time. We don't want flowers. We want the money to come to OLLIE so that you can prevent another family going through this. And at the end of the call, Sam's mum said, the tragedy on top of a tragedy is we now know he just started antidepressants. Britton, something went off in my head at that moment. It was like, hang on, I've heard this so many times. There's something here. There's something more that's going on. I did not know at this point what I very quickly found out, which was that antidepressants and antipsychotics for some people, as a side effect, will cause suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, it makes it worse.
Yeah. I was not aware of this,
Hmm.
but I very quickly got up to speed.
And yeah.
So what I did, I was thinking about all the families, like Sam's family, all the Sams in the world, all the parents who don't even know that actually maybe their child had fallen foul of these side effects. And then I was thinking about all the prescribers. What must it be like for Sam's GP, his doctor, that week to in their weekly briefing to be told that Sam had taken his life? Because I imagine that doctor felt awful. I imagine that doctor was very quickly trying to work out, was I clear about the side effects? Was I clear about what they should do? So this was also about moral injury for the prescriber. And I wondered how can we keep all these stakeholders safe? And I realise I'm just one woman and one small little charity, but that's never stopped me before. So very quickly, we created something called a prescription safe plan. Probably is reading back to
Oh yeah.
front, but that says my prescription safe plan. You can download this for free from our website. It's in 16 languages.
Oh wow.
Spanish, Bengali, Pashto, so many different languages. So there's no reason why most people around the world can't use this. This isn't a safe plan like we use in suicide prevention. This is very specific. It is something that stays with the patient, and it reminds them that if their well-being, if their mental health starts to deteriorate once they've started their medication, they must go back for a prescription review.
Hmm.
And it's really as simple as that. It's a bit of education
Yeah.
for the patient. But here's the thing: since I've started doing this, at the beginning of the talk, how I said doctors and nurses don't get trained in this stuff.
Right. Right.
Guess what else they're not that comfortable with? This. And so, actually, what's happening now is that people are going back to their prescribers and saying, I feel terrible on this. And what's happening is they up the dose when
Hmm.
really that person should be weaned off. I mean, not
Yes.
everyone. Obviously, everyone is
Or
individual.
changed.
Okay.
You hear this time and time again. Is well, number one, the main side effect is I feel numb. Like I don't feel good. I don't feel bad,
Yeah.
but everything's still the same.
Yeah.
Like, but as soon as I get off of this, I'm going back to the suicidal thoughts. So
Right.
is that really help? It's not really help. It's worse to not feel anything than it is to feel something. And that was
Right.
my logic for myself when I took myself off of medication.
Right.
That's just me. I'm stubborn. I wouldn't recommend doing that. You got to talk to your doctor about
Yeah.
weaning yourself off. But
Yeah. For sure.
um, there is, but you also see there's just no improvement in the mental health. Even with talk therapy, it's like it stifles everything and just kind of stagnates the process.
For many people, I think you've already shared with me. You had a terrible start, right?
Mm,
You went
yeah,
through it, and this is true for a lot of people. And we become so sort of. I was going to say something, but I probably shouldn't.
no, go ahead. We'll cut it if
I was just going to say it's like we live in like I was brought. I'm a similar age to you.
mhm,
I was brought up with Disney, and everything was lovely, and there were always
yeah,
happy endings. And as a society, we really shut down sadness. We're not comfortable with sadness, and everyone
right,
has to be happy and positive. And my gosh, that is to me one of the biggest problems because like any wound that's left unattended, well, sure, it might get better, but the chances are it will fester and become
right,
pretty poisonous.
yes,
We, you know, I was speaking to a brother and sister. The brother had rung me because the sister was suicidal again. Again, she was going to be sectioned. And he told me the story that possibly had many similarities to your own childhood. Awful abuse, and she was diagnosed with PTSD and
Hmm.
personality avoidant. There were all sorts of labels she was
Right,
given.
right.
And I said, the first when they finished telling me their terrible story of their upbringing, I said, I got to tell you, I don't think you have PTSD. I think you have a normal response to growing up with so much tragedy and so much grief.
Yeah,
And we had a bit of a chat around that, and they both, these were a young brother and sister, probably early 30s. And they said to me, "You are the first person that's ever said that to us.
yeah,
Like, but that felt good
yeah,
to be told, you're not abnormal. Your response is perfectly normal for
yeah.
what you went through. Like,
Yes,
they're the abnormal ones saying that you should be fine. Of course you're
right.
not fine. You were abused and everyone you cared for died or
Yeah.
left.
Hmm.
That's gonna mess
Abandonment, all of it. Yeah.
yeah.
Everybody walked away, leaving you standing on the playground by yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just how it is. That's amazing. That's so. I know one of the things, and maybe this will help you from your side to from my side to your side. One of the things I've learned through this process of going to take my life and now being on this side of it is I had to discover the true or the very true nature of who I am. And that is, I'm kind. I'm a good person. I'm generous. I'm loving. I want the best for people. I don't want animosity. I don't want this. Just because there's these reactions to life and we respond to them does not dictate who I truly am inside. So, like, I
Right.
get angry. So, do I beat myself up for being angry? Well, that's what I used to do, and that would snowball the effect.
Right.
Now I give myself grace for being angry
Right.
because I know it's not my true, that's not who I want to be. And when I give myself grace, I don't sit in that anger very long and I'm able to work through it and fight it in a different way. So at some point, and I hope, because it's not cured, it's not fixed, it's not done. At some point, I hope to say, you've had your time and I am now in control of this. And as I train myself and I build those muscles to do that, and it's hard, it's hard to shut your anger down, this thing that wants to
Yeah.
protect you from all the lies that you're being told because of it. And it's like, once I get a hold of that, I'm now forgiving myself. I'm now giving myself grace because I understand the true nature of who I am. I don't think a lot of people like me understand how beautiful they are. And you've kind of touched on this, that, it's easy to believe one bad thing and hard to believe all the beautiful things. We
Yes.
don't see that in ourselves. So, and as you're talking in the goal setting and meshing these two things together, it sounds like the very essence of my journey, and that is to help me discover the beauty of who I am. Because you can tell me all day long, it's not going to do me any damn good. But if I
Right.
discover it for myself and I start to believe you, and
Yeah.
then eventually believe myself, and then eventually know, then I'm able to heal and give it back. That's the beautiful thing. And that's
Well,
what
I
it sounds like you're doing and working towards, especially with young people. I love that.
it sort of scaffolds that inner knowledge and intuition that they're missing, that
Mhm.
they don't know how to reach and connect with. But it does seem to work very quick. And listen, I gotta, oh my gosh, I gotta say this. This was not my original work. This comes from a methodology called the theory of constraints. It was created by somebody called Dr. Ellie Goldratt. This is his work. But he used it in business. So he
Yeah,
used it.
I read that.
Right, right. So he used it like Amazon, Nike, the American Air Force, the Scottish government, just about any big organisation you can think of has probably used TOC at some point. It's a phenomenal system thinking
Wow.
system of thinking. There are many of us around the world that use it for personal development, which blows the minds of business
Yeah.
consultants who use it to make businesses better. But but we do, and as I said, I think I'm the first person in the world who's used it as a suicide prevention, and for me, it's been an absolute honour to take Dr. Goldrat's work and use it in a different way. But I can't claim that this was my original thinking.
Yeah, but maybe not. But what a beautiful like way to use that, and it is effective. I mean, that's one of the, if you, anybody that's suicidal has trouble with what is my purpose.
Yes.
I don't know how to make goals. I don't know how to hold a job. I don't have any aspirations or dreams, or like, how do I get into, like you asked me, it's by that very method that you had, is
Yeah.
let's look at the little branches and start looking at,
Yeah.
where the leaves are and where you just need to peel some of that back
Oh
and look
yeah.
at the beauty.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've put my neck on the line a few times. That's probably not the right phrase to use, but
No pun intended.
you can edit that out. But I have sort of put my hand up and said, I don't think suicide prevention should be taught in schools. And there is a big movement towards that. Now, I know that it's done quite well in some schools in America. In England, we've had people come out to America to investigate that and look at it. We have a big drive in England to bring suicide knowledge to children. And I
Hmm.
am 100% against it. And I tell you why. Because I
Idea.
know, well, listen, I know because I work with doctors and counsellors and psychiatrists and nurses and first responders, and they don't know half the stuff I know about suicide
Hmm.
prevention.
Yeah,
And now we're going to ask children to take this on. Like, if there was nothing
it's a
left
good
in the
point.
world, if there was nothing else we could do, fair enough. But I think if we taught them critical thinking, because you're
Hmm.
absolutely right, when we lose our purpose, that's like part of your soul just
Hmm.
evaporating. If we can teach people, there was a saying, not knowing how to achieve your goals is as dangerous as not having any goals.
Yes.
So there's an acronym SMART. Is it something you're familiar with? It's something people use a lot in the UK. So it stands for, if you have a goal, you use this acronym. S, is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable?
Hmm.
Is it I can't think what the R stands for, but the T is time bound. And like, kids grow up with this, businesses use it, and I always say, it's great. SMART is a great acronym to use, but where are the tactics and strategy? It assumes that you
Hmm.
know how to,
Right.
and if you don't know how to, it drives me nuts when you go to a parent child consultation at school and they need to find something to talk to you about, so they'll say, oh well, he's doing great or she's doing great, but they could be doing better in math. I'm like, okay. And so then they agree, at least this is what happens in the UK. So then
Well,
you
same thing.
agree, right? So then you agree a goal by the end of the school year or by the end of the next term, you are going to be at a higher grade. It drives me nuts. I'm like, how? If they could do it, don't you think they would be? So why don't we find out what's getting in their way now? And let's
Right.
work on that.
Hmm.
Let's see what's stopping them and then let's work around it. It's so obvious to me, and I don't know why people don't do it. But anyway, back to not teaching suicide prevention in schools. Teach them how to cause and effect logic, teach them how to reach their goals, and teach them conflict resolution.
Yes.
And with those three things, they have all the tools they need to understand the consequences of their action or non-action, to hopefully resolve their conflicts. It's so quick. Once you learn these processes, you don't need to write it down or work out, well, what do I need to do next?
Right.
You internalize it
Yep.
and you really quickly get to, it's amazing how quickly it sharpens you up to, if I do this, what are all the possible consequences? Like, we spoke about the history of suicide. No one thought about, well, what are the possible consequences? We think fellow to say moving to non-compos mentors, calling everyone mad if they take their life. We think that's a good thing. Are there possibly any negative consequences of this? I
Right.
don't suppose anyone in 17th century England could have imagined where we are today, where everyone is shoehorned down a pathway of, if you're thinking about suicide, you must be mentally ill. If you're mentally ill, you must need these people to help you.
Yes.
You know, you're probably familiar with the Wizard of Oz.
Hmm.
Dorothy always had the power in her shoes, didn't she?
Hmm.
Tin Man always had a heart, Lion always had courage. They just had lost sight of that. And that's what we've got to give people back. That, like you said just earlier, that self-knowledge, and that grace to be angry in this moment. But that being angry right now doesn't mean I'm an angry person.
Right.
I'm angry in this moment.
Yep.
Um,
And
but
tomorrow's a different day, and the next moment's different. And the more I'm able to look at myself in this and recognize this, I can start making the choice when this happens the next time. Do I want to be
yes,
that person?
yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly that. Viktor Frankl spoke about um, the gap between something that happens and our response.
Hmm.
And in that gap is our freedom to choose.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
nearly always, like me, like you, something happens, we go to anger.
Hmm.
We don't see the gap.
Right.
But as we become more self-aware, that gap becomes more obvious and we
It does.
realize there's a space I can choose. I
Yeah.
don't have to respond that way.
I was
And
just talking to a doctor, and he said I think it was 7 point some seconds. You have a choice to make. Like if it were for me, if I recognize that I'm getting upset, I have roughly 7 seconds to change the course of that.
right.
And you'd say, oh, well, that's not very much time. When you realize 7 seconds is actually the recognition of that is the very beginning of something, and that only takes a second. It only takes a millisecond to recognize. And if you can stretch it to 7 seconds, you've given yourself a lot more opportunity than you think.
Yeah.
So,
And that applies, whether it's drinking, drugs,
mhm,
eating. I'm
yep,
an emotional eater.
yep,
I get angry. I'm by the biscuit jar quicker than you can count to 7.
right.
But if I could slow it down and make a choice, like, is eating my emotion with this
Mhm,
biscuit healthy? I would probably make a better decision.
right.
I'm still working on that, but I'm trying.
Well, and this is, I've been working on this a little bit, but if I can recognize, number one, I can do something about it.
Yeah.
So that would create belief that I'm capable of doing something about it. And then as I work on it and it becomes, when I become more of the master of it, then it's a knowing that I'm capable.
Yes.
And I put that in with my faith or even the job, or like I have to recognize where I'm good and where I have shortcomings.
Hmm.
And oftentimes we think our shortcomings are our disadvantage, but they're actually, I think, are some of our greatest tools. And I'm learning that more and more as I talk to more and more suicidal people, because the very thing that seems to haunt them is actually probably their gift.
Mm.
And
Yes, it is the potential to be their gift,
yes,
um, and it is realizing that gift.
yeah,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah,
I agree completely with it.
yeah. The other thing we don't realize, especially for me, again, we go back to this black and white choice: is do I live or die? Is that this is a gift to be able to suffer, and per se, to have hardship, to have these difficulties, because these are our learning lessons. This is where wisdom is actually born in us. And what you're saying, if we teach people how to, this is my problem. I didn't know how to critically think my way out of the darkness that was built as a
Hmm.
child, and that was my wall that was built. But I didn't. I mean, I didn't know how to get out of it. And
No, why would you?
yeah, because those skills were not taught, number one. But number two, I had no way to learn those skills. Everything was gone in abandonment and all. There's no thing there for me.
Yeah.
So fortunately, what it did is in the process, it saved my life. And I would tell you that I've never met anybody more sane that is suicidal than me. And, and they say it's mental health. I'm like, how is this mental health if I can think this intelligently through this ugly thing, but yet
No.
I can't see outside the window because I don't have those skills. And that's what I'm learning about myself now as I sit with myself and these walls are torn down. I now have choices that I never had before because now I know I'm intelligent enough to critically think. I know I'm intelligent enough to read for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I know what meditation does for me and how it centers me and focuses me and brings back all those positive things, and that neuroplasticity continues because I'm thinking I'm doing something healthy for myself. Even if I'm struggling, I'm still pushing towards positive. I'm still fighting for something. And we miss sight of that. We think, well, I'm weak. I'm not this. I'm not that. If you made it to the kitchen today, you got out of bed, that's
Yeah,
pretty
really good.
strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And something you make me think about were two things, both very different, but one of them is I'm very interested in fractals and fractals in behavior, self-repeating patterns,
yes.
emotional, the epigenetics of emotion down through generations.
Mm-hmm.
And what you were just speaking about now for me was like a fractal, because those opportunities, we see that on a global level, on a national level as well. Things that happen to us there are enough awful things happening
Yeah.
around the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We all have a choice how we respond. Our governments have a choice in how they're responding to other countries' crisis. And for me, it's the same thing. Or maybe not the same thing, but the essence is the same. We
Right.
have a choice.
Yes.
And, there are some pretty terrible things happening right now, but they could also be our greatest moments
Right.
where we come together and we have salvation,
Mm-hmm.
or the opposite.
Yeah.
It used to really freak me out. Actually, I used to think a lot about Newton's cradle. Those balls that knock
Mm-hmm.
each other,
Yeah.
and the whole equal and reactive force. And I got lost for a long time in thinking about, well, if I'm or other people are doing good over here, then there's an equal and reactive force over here of
Mm.
things that aren't. And I couldn't work out, well, do we just need to not do very much? Like, should we not do so much good in the world for fear of that equal and reactive
Yeah.
force?
The opposite.
And the only way I could solve it, Britain, was by imagining, well, if enough of us are doing good things over here, we're going to knock those balls all the way
Mm-hmm.
round to another level of consciousness. And that's the only way I could make sense of it. And it's sort of been my guiding light ever since, really.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely not stop doing what we're doing.
When you're actually seeing that happen in society now, I know that we're at an all-time high as far as mental health issues and suicide rates and stuff like that, but you're also seeing a profound number of people that have been down that road, for lack of better terms, becoming very enlightened
Right.
in there. Like, it's just this paradigm shift that happens, and it's happening to so many people right now. And, that wildfire is starting to catch. So I think that's a beautiful thing. I think we're on the right side of turning the tides now. And again, it might get a little worse, but there's more awareness now towards this. And there's, even in this short year that I've been doing this, like, the taboo behind it is I go to people, I'm like, I'm the suicide monk. You talk about suicide and they're like, oh, that's cool. Instead of, oh, like, there's
Yeah,
not this retraction in
yeah,
their spirit because there's not much separation between them and somebody they know.
absolutely. Absolutely. Almost everyone I ever speak to,
Mm-hmm.
every time we give a talk, somebody will leap over across the auditorium. I get two very strong reactions, typically from bereaved fathers. One is complete rejection of anything I say,
Yeah.
that their child had to have been mentally ill. There is no other explanation. And then the other response is like throwing their arms around me and saying, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
things are making sense to me now.
Yeah.
Especially, so one of the things I talk about, we get asked as an organisation all the time, can you come and speak to our colleagues or our students about spotting the signs? And that always makes us laugh at Ollie because, like, if we could tell you what signs to spot, we'd love to, but
I
that's not
mean,
the way.
does this face look like a suicidal face?
Exactly,
No.
exactly. It's just anyway. But you know, we sort of give them something, but it's not what they thought. It's not,
Right.
you know. But one of the things that I say, especially to those who've been bereaved of a colleague, of a patient, of a loved one, not spotting the sign, even though that's not a phrase I like to use, but I go with it. Not spotting the sign may have had nothing to do with you.
No.
They may have wanted to protect you. They may have wanted to keep you safe.
Mm-hmm.
For many people, there is a real strong inbuilt protect the cave feature.
Yeah.
And for guys, if you've lost your purpose, if you don't think you're contributing, if you've persuaded yourself that your family would be better off without you, you know, a hitman does not warn its target, it just takes them out. Most people are not going to well, forget that, not most people, but what I'm trying to share with many bereaved people is if you didn't notice anything. So I worked with this kid, he was 16, he hadn't slept properly in about a year
Mm-hmm.
after the death of his uncle, the suicide of his uncle. His uncle was very close in age, he was very young compared to this
Mm-hmm.
boy's mother. And so the uncle was often in the house, they would play PlayStation, he was often there for dinner. She really had an extra kid rather than a
Right.
younger brother. And this 16-year-old boy could not forgive himself because they were so close, and he just thought, how, you know, where was my attention? How selfish am I? That
Mm-hmm.
because if I'd noticed, I would have been able to help him and stop him. And after about a year of dwelling on this, he asked if he could meet with someone from OLLIE. So I went and met him. He just wanted to try and understand suicide a bit more. And I explained to him, you know, many times people will not warn other people.
Right.
You think there might be signs, but there could be all sorts of reasons. He very definitely could have been trying to protect you. Maybe he didn't want you to stop him, you know?
Yeah.
This boy,
That's a big thing.
yes. So this boy's shoulders, you saw them come down.
Mm-hmm.
And the next morning I got an email from his mother saying, like, did you cast a magic spell? Because he has just had the best night's sleep in a year. And I said to her, no, obviously I didn't cast a spell, but what I let her son know was that it wasn't his fault.
Right.
And so that's one of the messages we share with delegates that come on some of our training is, if you didn't spot the signs, please take that guilt away.
Yeah.
Because it's very likely there were no signs to spot. Yet, you could be a stranger on a bridge, on a platform, in a bar, and spot the signs.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes it's people that don't know you that you feel able to talk to or share something with. So
Yeah.
that's why intervention is so important.
Yeah. And honestly, it's so just a little story for you. She's a friend of mine and my first podcast. And the name of it is profound. She's in her 20s, highly suicidal. And she's like, you know, it's hard to live with the person that wants to kill you every day. And I was like, oh my God, yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
yeah,
It is. There is nothing. And that's where I haven't really found my direction in how I'm going to use my gift, but maybe that's it. And maybe that's part of it is because that's kind of what I'm doing now is helping, some families understand their kids and why they think the way they think.
right.
And, you know, as when we're close to people that we know are suicidal and they've brought us in, we want to save them. We're just like, it's this, and the best thing you can do is allow them to be who they are. right now, and allow them to think the way they're thinking. Just walk with them and be in
And
presence.
that's
And
why I think that cloud process works very neatly
yes,
with people.
yeah, it's
It's
not about forcing. It's about helping them recognize
yeah,
what they're struggling with. And when you start picking it apart, you're like, oh, well, that was easy to deal with. That's easy. Oh, all this is easy to deal with.
yeah.
It's just, and that's what, you're talking about, the compartmentalization. And that's how I meditate. I learned how to put all these, my job is one thing, my spirituality is another, the kids or whatever it is, they're all separate but my focus is here, and the library of crap is all out here.
Library
So
of crap. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah. So it's like, if I can stay here, I can now start to deal with each of these things
Mm,
in a healthy way, because meditation, for me, I feel like it has improved the quality of my life.
right.
I look forward to it. I was getting ready to go to bed last night, and I just felt like, I was like, I just want to, and I sat in it for an hour, and not intentionally. It's just because I was in it. And I was like 5 minutes, and you just enter into it, and it's like, wow, it's just a place. But what comes out of that and the days following are answers, and an unfolding to difficult situations, because I've entered into this thing called life in a different way now. And it's not one that can just whoop me. It is one now that I get to walk with. And we're talking about those veils like that. There's this dark side and this kind of this other side that we see, and why it's, I could choose to still look at my story the way I have,
Hmm.
or I can say that story made me this beautiful, incredible person. And now I understand a multitude of things. And there's nothing that I regret about my story. Absolutely nothing. I'm glad it all happened.
Right.
Um, and I think we do. It's like, this is an outward thing. It's not a definition of who I am. These things happened to me.
Hmm.
There was things I couldn't control. There was things I could. It shaped me in a way, but it also made me something today that I wouldn't want to be anything else. I mean, isn't that weird? Like,
It's
this
beautiful. It's not
man that
weird.
was, yeah. Like, I was committed to taking my life, and so many things stood in my way unintentionally. The universe was like, no, we didn't come this far to just let go, over and over and over and over. And I'm like, if I ever needed evidence of a God or a creator or a universe or anything, I had miracle after miracle after miracle.
Really.
Yeah. And I have, if I start looking back at my life and how many accidents I've been in, without seat belts, drinking and driving, drugs, whatever it is, like absolute insane stuff, I should be dead. And I'm barely, barely damaged. Do I live in pain? Yeah. But I'm barely damaged.
Right.
And it's miraculous.
Well,
Miraculous.
that is. Thank you for sharing that with me. And one of the things I will say, I know we're probably running out of time, but I know there's a lot of research that says that the best messages we can give if we're talking about suicide is around hope, and it's
Mm-hmm.
people like yourself. It doesn't matter. Your stories will be different, but where the commonality is getting to a point where you don't think you can continue, and yet you have, and that gives people so much hope. So I bet this podcast, wow, it must reach so many people and give so much hope to so many.
I mean, I hope so. I, my logic, or I don't know what my logic right now is. If I keep my focus on the one person out there, then it keeps me humble. And that's, I learned that in my faith, and that is the most important thing. Like, what more can I do than put the umbrella over two people? And, if hopefully they'll get an umbrella and make that four. That we just start coming and standing alongside each other and stop trying to change each other, and just really love each other until they see who they really are through
Yeah,
your eyes. And, and it's painful and it's hard. I mean, it's a difficult road for people to walk with, people who want to take their life. I mean, I get it. and it's not easy, but it's so necessary for solid, strong, sound, healthy people to just come alongside. And I have to remind myself, I'm not here to just to save people. I'm here to help them save themselves. That's a better way of putting it.
There's a very old saying: "Save one person and you save the world." Do you know it?
I've never heard that.
Um, and when you think about it, I think it sort of speaks to some of what you were just saying. But I absolutely agree, and it's another reason why I really deeply appreciate those thinking tools that I shared earlier, because it's Socratic. It brings people to their own knowledge and their own solutions.
Yeah.
I'm just there scaffolding,
Right.
facilitating the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Just pointing out the beautiful parts of who they are and saying, is the negative true? Like,
yeah,
really, is it true?
yeah,
Do you really like, and then you start picking it apart. It's like, oh, it's really not true. But I'll finish. I remember now why I was telling you this story, because it's relevant, and just recognizing somebody. So my first episode, she's a friend of mine, and we were at a company bonfire that night. Pretty dark, but she's walking out of the bonfire and walks close enough to me where I kind of recognize something's not right. Okay, just a micro vibration, something's a little off. So I just say, "Hey, how are you doing?" Well, I don't really remember how it happened, but she came and sat by me and then started telling me her story. And it it was one of the most horrific stories I've ever heard. And from that point, fast forward 2 years, all I've ever done every week to 2 weeks is check on her, make sure she knows she's loved. If because of her condition, she's very disassociated. So if I didn't hear from her for 3 days, every day I'm on it. Like, you with me? You with me? You with me? Until she'd answer. And so fast forward 2 years, and right before the podcast started, and this was one of the big reasons this started, but we're sitting there and we're having a conversation, and she goes, "You saved my life." I was like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You remember the night we met?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I was going to go take my life that night." And I was like, that all I did was recognize you in a moment. And that's a lot of times all it takes. And so fast forward another year, and we're on the phone, and I see her smile genuinely for the first time. And that light and that belief in herself is starting to take hold. Now, yes, this is a 3-year process, but she's also borderline, highly suicidal,
Mhm.
and highly traumatized. So 3 years, she's been alive 3 years, and she's been working and
Absolutely.
fighting, and she's been doing it every day, and not every day's been easy, but she smiled and she saw light. And does that mean that I think that shows potential and hope
Yeah.
that maybe it's not fixed today, but when something like that and that severe a light can shine through that, be conscious of who's around you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for reminding us all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Be
not that I did anything. All I did was have a conversation with somebody, just because I thought so. It's not because I'm some hero, or it's because I care. And that's all we have to do is care.
and also, I think people need to. I hope what people take from listening to you is also that if they see someone and they feel something's off, it's okay. Say something.
Yeah.
Just say hello.
Don't be
Hey.
embarrassed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You could literally be saving a life.
Yeah. Never be embarrassed of those things. And I have been, so I've learned that lesson hard, but
Yeah.
and not to that degree, but to where somebody got hurt, and because I was ashamed and afraid to do something or say something.
Right.
Yep. Hard lesson. But do you have any closing uh suggestions, advice, anything we can do to help you from across the pond? And for those that in your area that help you, and I guess I forgot I'm circumvented. So yeah, yeah,
Well, listen, going back to the charity and the work we do, we have
Yeah.
a lot of work that's online. As I say, it's free. And we're really big on well-being and connection. So we have every fortnight we have a online Pilates class.
Oh,
And
that's every 14 days for you Americans.
yeah, every 14 days. And also we
Fortnite.
do.
That's a video game.
That's a video game. No, we don't play Fortnite.
Yeah.
But maybe we could. The other thing we run every 14 days is a Zentangle, a mindful art class. You
Oh,
don't need any artistic skill. You don't need anything other than literally a scrap of paper and a pencil. And it's 90 minutes of just mindful, meditative
what?
art.
Oh
It's
my gosh.
amazing. You've got to come.
Yeah, I got to try this. You're gonna have to send me the links to this
I'm
stuff
going to
because
send you the link.
so I know somebody that I think would be interested in that as well.
Oh yeah, we have so many American brothers and sisters come along because if you're isolated
Yeah.
and if finance is difficult,
Mm.
um, uh, and this is why we started it. I actually started these things in COVID. When people were separated, I particularly wanted it to be for medical staff and for people because, if we go back 3 or 4 years, remember, people could not visit people
Right.
in hospital.
Yeah. Hmm.
So we started putting on these Zentangle. At that time, we were doing them twice a week. And then we dropped to once a week. And now it's twice a month, and that's just due to funding. We don't ask for money, but we can't operate without
Right.
it.
Right. Right.
So we do everything as cheaply as possible. We don't have offices. We all work from our kitchen table. We do things as cheaply as possible to make sure any funding we get goes to the work we want to be doing. We have a community garden. We teach people to grow food and herbs for their well-being.
So cool.
Obviously, most of your listeners will never be able to see that garden, but I can send you a picture. And if you ever come to Hertfordshire in England, we would love for you to come and visit and taste the food. But yeah, so we're not just up here in the prevention and intervention space. We're right down here with well-being.
Nice.
And the Zentangle, the Pilates, we do it online. We make it free. We know things are tough for people. So that's one way of people engaging and just having 90 minutes where they're not thinking about anything else.
Yeah. Well, and that actually is longer than 90 minutes because it helps the longevity of that peacefulness or that restfulness
Really
last.
does. Yeah.
I say peacefulness very loosely because I never understood peace until recently.
Right.
I never
We
knew.
have people, we've had people with end stage cancer who, if they're having a good moment, it's something that they can do that brings them joy. We've had people who are bereaved by suicide, and it's something that stops them, gives them a short break from their grief. We've had families come on with their children, and it's just a fun activity to do. It doesn't matter what, you don't need a reason. If you just want
Right.
to come and enjoy it and be part of our community.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate everything, and
It's been lovely.
just being willing to be on a podcast like this, and the Suicide Monk. So I really do appreciate you being here and all the beautiful information. Like, you've inspired me today. I love it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
If there's anything we can do or I can do to support your goals and the OLLIE Foundation, or just anybody in general, we're open here. So
Thank you. We'll keep you in touch. We'll add you and let you know all the things we're up to. And then, if it feels relevant, please share them, and come along. Come and join us on all our things.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this little journey. So this is cool. Yeah.
This has been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.